What's good? This is Vedic Ghost. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. This is going to be a cross-channel stream, just like the next one's going to be a cross-channel stream because apparently YouTube's been messing with my channels lately. So this is going to be a cross-channel stream. If you noticed, I've been streaming on both channels because YouTube's been like messing with one video, but leaving one video, and then the video disappears, and then I have a video up on the other one. So I'm just making sure the message stays out there for all intents purposes. So yeah. Um, Something I've noticed lately, well, I've noticed it for a while, when it comes down to the left, is how they create victims. They inadvertently create victims by pushing pushing and saying narratives that they do. The sad part about that is it makes for a very hostile and it makes for a very uneasy environment for all intents and purposes when you do this. It's sad. But on top of that, they try to equate a lot of these people to groups like black people. The problem with it though is you can actually hide being gay. You can actually hide being gay. You can hide being trans. You can hide being uh, a certain religion. You can hide pretty much anything. What you can't hide is being black because you can pretty much see that a mile away for all intents and purposes. And this is the narrative that they always push when they try to push these. What's up, Win? This is the narrative they always push when they try to push these narratives and things when they try to make people seem like they're more victimized than what they really are. The sad part about that is they inadvertently make them more of an oppressed group or more victimized than what they normally are by touting this stuff and saying all the stuff that they do. The sad part about that is nobody says anything about it and everybody just pretty much sweeps it under the rug and pretends like they're not creating the problems that everybody else is actually facing in this world, when in fact they're creating the very problems that everybody is facing. It's sad, but it's true. The problem with a lot of the problem with a lot of these narratives that they push, like, is, like I said, you pretty much create victims out of all these people. Like, they might not have been victimized as much, they might have been victimized very little, but the minute you start touting it and pushing it down people's throats, you basically get a backlash and you make them much more, even bigger victims than what they were in the first place. Sadly, it's like you pretty much paint a target on their back, and that's pretty much how it works. But people don't want to see that. Oh, FYI, like, subscribe, and share. But people don't want to see that, and they want to make sure they want to push a certain narrative, and they want to blame everybody else while creating the very problem that they are actually facing. They literally create the very problem that a lot of these groups are actually facing. And the sad part about that is they blame the other group. Well, the sad part about that is nobody told you to force that down another group's mouth. We've learned in history, time and time again, that you can't force somebody to do something without backlash or recoil or recourse or pushback, basically. But the sad part about that, the left either forgets history or rewrites history or kind of sort of admitted that out of history for the fact that they believe that what they do is right, when in fact it's actually very wrong and very hurtful and very harmful to the very people who you're touting. The sad part about that is the thing that I noticed is you can't force something down somebody's throat and expect them to actually be okay with it. That'd be like me force feeding you fucking bacon or something like that, and you're a vegetarian or you're a vegan. How do you make that work? That's wrong. Then how are you forcing something down somebody's throat? Not wrong. If you know what I mean. That'd be like, me forcing somebody's kid who's a non-vaxxer to go get vaccines. Like, who are you? Who am I to make that kid get a vaccine? So it's one of those things where it's like you have to basically be mindful and respectful and be able to read the room around you to basically be able to pull off shit. And the sad part about it, the left doesn't read the room around them. They basically just complain and cry and push shit, and they expect everybody to reciprocate their sentiment or their feelings when in fact we don't. A lot of us don't, sadly. The sad part about that is, you, like I said in one stream, you get more bees with honey. is the best way I can actually describe it. If you're going to force something down somebody's throat, you're not being a bee. When you're being a bee, you're just stinging people, and you're expecting people not to swat you back, basically, because you're stinging people. It's pretty much how it works. But if you actually use honey, you do it in a way you can basically get everybody to come aboard and be okay with what you got going on. But if you're going to force it on everybody's throat, you're going to be exterminated, basically, or you're going to have pushback or negative recourse for all intents and purposes for your actions. For every action, there's a reaction. We learn this in science. You can't force something on somebody and not expect a reaction to you're forcing something on somebody. Like I said, you get more bees with honey. And the sad part about that is, I don't know if the left doesn't know anything about this, or they, admit it out of mind, out of sight, out of mind type shit, or they really don't think about the shit too much to really care for his purposes, which is sad. And the sad part about that is, while you're trying to push this narrative, you're literally victimizing a subsection of people who you're quote unquote are rallying for. If you notice, the gay community is pretty much laying low because you don't push the narrative so damn far. The gay community is pretty much like, yep, yeah, so that picnic we supposed to go to. They're not even really riding with you 100% anymore. They're just like off on their own thing now, because they know that it's only a matter of time. If they ride with you 100%, there's going to be backlash and pushback on their community, and they don't need that. It took them a while to get to where they were, and they did it the proper way. You, on the other hand, you're forcing it down people's throats. I mean, don't get me wrong. When it first started, there were some people just forcing it down your throat, but typically they learn how to get around it and do it properly. This is typically why there's more people show up at the gay pride parade than the lesbian pride parade, basically. I'm just saying, it's facts, whether you like it or not. It's basically a fundamental difference between the NBA and the WNBA. More people show up to watch the NBA than they do to watch the WNBA. If you market it better and you don't, spew hate or, dissension, you'll get more fans. You'll get more views. And if the players paid a little bit better, I mean, some of them do play pretty good, but not all of them play very well. Some of them just basically suck. Hate to say it, but that's neither here nor there. But it's one of those things where you basically have to show your skills at the end of the day, so people can actually believe you or believe in you or want to watch you, basically, or want to follow you or want to ride with you 100% at the end of the day. This is typically, because the sad part about that, you'll basically end up vilifying that group of people that you're rooting for the hardest at the end of the day. And if you're going to vilify that group of people, what was the point of you actually rooting for them and pushing a narrative in the first damn place if you're going to destroy it? And that's literally what you're doing. You're literally destroying a narrative that didn't even need to be destroyed if you'd have did it properly. Yeah, get more bees with honey than vinegar, basically. And it's true. It's like you can't force something on somebody. You can't always be trying to spit fire or spit vinegar at somebody and expect everybody to be okay with it because you're wet. The sad part about that, it's only a matter of time before people push back. No matter if you're man, woman, or child, it's only a matter of time before people push back against you and start talking shit on you and start disrespecting you. Because the sad part about that is, if you're going to force it on somebody, you're actually disrespecting them. So you can't expect not to be disrespected back by a person, basically, at the end of the day, by forcing it on them. It's like, it's their right to choose and pick and choose what they want to accept and what they don't want to accept. There's this thing called rights. Either choose to or choose not to. Because the sad part about that is, we always talk about rights and stuff like that, but the left always talks about enforcing shit on people. The sad part about that, the minute they start enforcing shit on you, you want to feel some type of way. And it's sad, but it's true. Whether you like it or not, anytime somebody enforces anything on you that you don't like, you want to feel oppressed. The sad part about that is, you're doing the exact same thing to other people. You're oppressing other people. So the sad part about that is, when the government enforces stuff on you, you cry about it and you read about it, and it gets changed eventually. But the sad part about that is, when you do it, you try to force it on people, and the backlash is greater, or people just ignore you and don't pay attention to you, and you wonder why shit doesn't get done. The sad part about that is, the government has a bigger hand, and more people actually are scared of the government than they are actually you, sadly. Um, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people that are scared of being of cancel culture, but at the end of the day, what is cancel culture though? What is cancel culture if you own a business? What is cancel culture? Granted, you could be your whole entire business would be canceled, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where cancel culture is starting to get annoying to the point where a lot of people aren't really paying attention and a lot of people aren't really following the whole entire cancel culture trend, basically. Like they'll say, cancel this person. And that person's still doing fine. They still got their job and they're still going. The sad part about that, cancel culture is starting to wear thin on people's psyche and wear thin on people. Because the sad part about that, the left is actually starting to catch the cancel culture, sadly, believe it or not. But what you can't do is sit there and force it on people and expect them to be okay with the shit that you're enforcing on them, sadly. Because at the end of the day, it's going to hurt very badly and you're going to face backlash and you're not going to like it. And you're going to cry oppression, basically, when in fact you're the one that were oppressing people. It's funny how the oppressors cry oppress, if you know what I mean. Yeah, what's up, Brandon Horror Collection? It's funny how the oppressor cries oppress, and it's usually how it works. When you're oppressing people and everything's going your way, you're fine. The minute that people start pushing back, oh, now all of a sudden you're oppressed. It's like you do know you were oppressing people before the pushback, right? And you do know there's eventually going to be pushback if, like I said, there's consequences to your actions. You either accept your consequences or you get screwed by your consequences at the end of the day. You can't sit up here and say, well, this, that, and the other, and it's not fair that this is happening. Well, it's happening, and you have to like it, whether you like it or not. You have to. And people always want to pretend as if they're the ones in an oppressed class when in fact they're not. You're the ones actually oppressing the people. Like I said, it's funny how the oppressors are the ones crying oppress. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where like you can't inadvertently make victims and then blame the other side for actually doing what they do naturally. That'd be like if you were to come to me and say, no blacks allowed. Uh, how am I supposed to change the fact that my skin is black to make it so that I won't be oppressed anymore? I can't. Unless I go like skin whitening. The sad part about that is that takes too damn long. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it takes so damn long and it costs so much damn money. Ain't nobody got time for that, sadly. And it's pretty much how it works because you have to do it over a period of time. You can't just do it an overnight unless you want to impose health risk and problems on yourself, sadly. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you can't equate other people's problems to black for the fact that black people can't get rid of their skin overnight. However, you can get rid of your hijab, you can get rid of your kufi or your turban overnight. Hell, you can get rid of it in an hour. You can get rid of you can actually go back to being a normal person and not saying anything about your private life in a matter of seconds. Whereas black people, you basically see them. They stick out like sore thumbs. You basically see them walking down the street. The sad part about that is so bad, because I talk about this so much. It's so bad, you're more likely to notice a black person over your cell phone. That's how bad it is. Because the sad part about that is people walk down the street on a regular basis. They don't really pay attention to shit. The minute a black person, a person with dark skin, comes into their line of vision or sight, they pay attention, they cross the street, and they go back to their cell phone. Anybody else, it's like, well, la 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 la. They'll walk out in front of cars, they'll walk out in front of buses, they'll walk out in front of trams, they'll walk out in front of trains, they'll walk out in front of every damn thing else. They'll walk out during a green light and damn near get hit by a bus or a car or anything, or run somebody down and then be mad at you for you hitting them. Meanwhile, they ran into you. This is basically society today. However, this is something I noticed about the left. When it comes to black people, they notice black people, then they'll cross the street from black people. Only time they deal with black people is when they're doing something like donations or donations, when they're donating or when they're like, giving out free meals or something like that, or donating shit like that, or, donating time or, working for some type of church. That's the only time they deal directly with black people. or when they're like working for some type of like charity or charitable thing for all intents and purposes. That's the only time they deal with black people. They don't deal with black people unless they know those black people. The sad part about that is they fake like they're all about black people, but they don't deal with no black people basically, unless they're doing something like, a charity or a donation, or, feed the homeless or something like that. That's the only time they deal with black people. Like when you see them walking down the street, they're more inclined to actually dodge black people than actual conservatives are. It's true. I've actually watched it many times. I've actually watched white conservative women literally walk past me, smile, and wave, and then you got the white liberal woman, the white liberal woman on her phone, damn near got hit by the car, pay attention to me, then cross the street. Now you want to pay attention to traffic because I'm coming, but you weren't paying attention to traffic even before that. Or my favorite is the white liberal women who will be walking down the street with their children and have their children running all over the place during busy traffic intersection shit. And all of a sudden, when they see me, now all of a sudden they want to hold their child's hand. White conservative woman is already holding their child's hand. And the sad part about that, they wave to me. Their children wave to me. Like, let that sink in. Their children wave, hi. White conservative women's children literally wave to you, if you've ever noticed. White liberal women's children really don't wave to you. They look at you like they're scared of you, basically, for the most part, I've noticed. But white conservative women children, they literally wave to you, they talk to you, they have whole entire conversations with you, and they talk about how's your day, how you doing, and they look so cute and they run away because like they're so innocent, basically. And it's the funniest thing in the world to watch. Whereas white liberal women's children, they basically treat you like you're dangerous, or they treat you like you ain't shit, basically, is what I've noticed when it comes to stuff like that. And it's sad. It's very sad to watch. But the sad part about that is it's one of those things where you realize that the very people who are preaching this stuff don't practice what they preach. It's kind of like how they say, well, men are wrong, or men are wrong for not wanting to date trans women, basically. I think I said that right. Trans women are the ones who, or men who transition into women, I believe. I could be wrong, but basically, they're basically saying men are wrong for not wanting to date men who transition into women, basically. They're women too, is what they'll say. However, on the flip side, what they'll actually say to you is, if you ask them the same thing about trans women, trans men, they'll basically say, well, no, or they'll make up some excuse on why they can't or why they don't, basically. But the minute you say, well, that's not what I'm into, all of a sudden you're racist, you're oppressive, and you're prejudiced, basically, and you're transphobic, basically. But they can actually get away with that same narrative and actually glance over it and walk around it, basically. It's sad, but it's true. And the sad part about that is that's something I've noticed with the left. They typically hold more racist views than the actual conservative side of things. Don't get me wrong. There's ridiculous people on both sides, but typically when I'm actually in my day-to-day life, I'm more inclined to get negative pushback from a leftist than I am from a conservative. Is what I've noticed. Because conservatives basically go off of if they know you and your rapport that they have with you, basically, and their initial perception of you for all intents and purposes. Whereas leftists, they basically just assume the worst, basically, so they treat you badly. At the end of the day, it's typically how it works. And the sad part about that, it happens so often, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's like it's funny how like all these liberal women talk about black this, black that, black this, black that, but but they never date a black person and are sitting in a hot tub with a white guy who's actually, like I said, who's financing her life so they can live this free and carefree life, basically, for carefree lifestyle for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that is a lot of the times the women who actually on the left who actually push for black this and black that, they're basically dating Asian men, or they're dating white men, basically. Even though they down white men and they talk shit on white men, they're literally dating the very white men that they talk shit on. Like, let that sink in for a second. And if they're not dating them, they're dating Asian men, or they're dating Indian men, or they're dating, Arab men, basically. Everybody but black men, for all intents and purposes. Typically, liberals have this mindset that, you know, black men are good for sex, but they're not really good for long-term relationships per se. You're more likely to see a black man in a relationship with a conservative woman than you are to see a black man in a relationship with a liberal woman in this day and age, sadly. Um, and it's true. Like, I've seen conservative Asian women dating black men. I've seen conservative white women dating black men. I've seen conservative Arab women dating black men. I've seen conservative Latinas dating black men. Pretty much, if you're conservative, you're probably dating a black man to some extent. At the end of the day, if you're liberal, you're probably making up every excuse not to date a black man, but you're probably having sex with a black man on low key for all intents and purposes. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are those liberals that are dating black men, but let's just keep it 100. Um, that's basically probably for show or just to piss off your family. Basically, let's just keep it 100. And it is what it is. So you got to pick your poison. You got to understand what you're dealing with at the end of the day. And it's sad, but it's true. But like, people do this shit on a regular basis, and you gotta pay attention to this stuff. And you gotta wonder what's going on at the end of the day. So yeah, that's about all I got. And it's just the fact that they create victims that they claim are victims. They help create them and make it worse for them. The sad part about that, these people aren't really facing that much oppression before they got involved in their lives. Now they're facing all types of oppression, and it's like they do it on purpose, just so they can have an example of oppression. Basically, the sad part about that is the stuff that they claim happens so few and far between, up until they got their rubby little hands on it, and now it happens more often now, so they can actually have a narrative. I think they literally do it on purpose, just so they can create victims, just so they can cry about it. That's just my hypothesis on it. The reason why the left roots so hardly for these people is to create is to basically make it so they're in a situation where they're being victimized, just so they can actually use it to their narrative for all intents and purposes. The best way. That's the only hypothesis I've came up with. So, because the sad part about that, people generally don't get oppressed or get disrespected as much as they do until the left actually gets involved in the situation. Basically, is what I've noticed. The minute the left gets involved in a situation, this is where the shit starts. This is where the shit starts hitting the fan, and people start getting disrespected and hated on more. And because the pushback basically comes from the shit being forced on other people who don't want shit forced on them. People want to naturally gravitate towards something. People don't want to be forced to do something that they don't want to do at the end of the day. And if you force somebody to do something that they don't want to do at the end of the day, you're going to get pushed back, and it's going to be bad, whether you like it or not. At the end of the day, it is what it is. It's the nature of the beast. You can't force something on somebody and expect them to be okay with it. That would be like me walking in your house and taking over your fucking house. You're going to be pretty pissed about that shit. The same thing, you're doing the exact same thing when you and try to enforce things or force things onto people. You're literally pretty much stealing somebody's house right now, and you're taking over their fucking house. Like, you can't do that. You can't do that. It doesn't work like that. But I digress. Y'all have a good one. I'm going to take a intermission, and I'm going to start up this next video about eating, working out, eating healthy, and sleep for all intents and purposes. Y'all be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk. Do nothing but spoil yourselves. This is Vedic Ghost, and I'm out.